your teacher, listen to your mother.
We're back on Herp Talk. Today we're going to be talking to Auburn student Bobby Kessinger about his research in interesting breeding strategies of frogs. So what are we learning about today?
Alright, Ross, it's actually pretty interesting. So in our research project, we decided to look at and focus on the factors that affect explosive breeding in several species of Anura. So we looked at Anaxarus woodhousei, we looked at Rana sylvatica, we looked at Rana ludiventris. So we believe that the main factors that affect explosive breeding are both physiological responses and environmental responses, respectively. So we researched previously published articles and papers to further our base of knowledge on the study area.
Okay, Bobby. So what do you believe is driving these species to engage in this explosive breeding you speak of?
Alright, so the factors that we actually studied closely were both the physiological and the environmental factors that drive explosive breeding. So these are the main causes for explosive breeding, but there also are some like environmental and biotic factors that generally make explosive breeding an event that occurs. First, you have to have heavy rains that occur in short intervals. Then you have to have males that gather together and create choruses. And then you have to have this occur in dry areas with scarce water sources.
So Bobby, tell me what's significant about these species you decided to study?
Alright, well let's talk about it. So we have these three main species that we investigated. We'll start with the Anaxarus woodhousei. Rana ludiventris. Also going to discuss Rana sylvatica.
This study is titled The Sexual Selection on Morphology in an Explosive Breeding Amphibian, the Columbia Spotted Frog, Rana ludiventris, by Allison Green and Chris Funk. This study focuses on the influence of sexual selection on male morphology in a species that displays explosive breeding. The Columbia spotted frog, Rana ludiventris, are found in the western part of the United States and are known to display an extreme scramble mating system. To determine if morphology had an influence on mating success, the authors conducted an experiment at a small lake on the north side of Spruce Mountain in Montana. The lake is simple in shape and has a surface area of approximately 100 acres and a max depth of 4 meters. The breeding season for this species only lasted 4 days while the experiment was conducted in June of 2002. A total of 92 egg masses were deposited under 1 meter of water, and they were found at 3 main areas along the shore of the lake. They collected 33 epileptic pairs and 24 single males from the breeding area. They then took the same 12 to 14 measurements depending on the sex. Some of these measurements included snout vent length, chest width, forearm length and width, and the length and width of nuptial pads in males. And these are just going to be a few tables and graphs from the results of the experiment. In this first table, you can see the measurements comparing the paired and unpaired males. There are a few differences between the paired and unpaired males, with the paired males having an overall thicker nuptial pad, a wider upper arm, and a narrower chest than the unpaired males. In this next table, you can see the morphological measurements of male and female Columbia spotted frogs. The females tended to have larger snout vent lengths and a wider chest, while the males had significantly wider forearms. In this figure, you can see the correlation between the body size and the thickness of forearms in the males and females. The males are concentrated in the upper area, and they have a smaller body size and a thicker forearm, while the females are the group on bottom and had a larger body size and thinner forearm length. Their hypothesis that the benefit of larger, more muscular forearms and larger nuptial pads occurs during the initial attempt to secure amplexus with females. While observing inbreeding activities, they noted approximately 30 attempted takeovers of amplectic females by single males, but none of these attempts were successful. Thus, once a male successfully grabs to a female, it is difficult to dislodge him. Their results suggest that there is a small morphological difference between males of Columbia spotted frogs that may be important in influencing mating success. However, this is just for the species alone. There are still many questions to be asked about what truly makes males successful during a period of explosive breeding.
I am going to discuss a paper by James Petrenka and Daphne Thomas titled Explosive Breeding Reduces Egg and Tadpole Cannibalism in Wood Frog Rana sylvatica. Rana sylvatica is a small brown frog with black marks and unwebbed forelegs found throughout North America, but most interestingly, it is the only annuran species that is able to reside within the Arctic Circle. During the winter, wood frogs stop their breathing and their hearts do not beat. In order to keep ice from freezing in their cells, they produce a type of antifreeze that keeps them safe. They can withstand temperatures of negative 40 degrees Celsius. In Alaska, wood frogs will remain frozen from November through April. There are scientists studying this adaptive mechanism of the wood frog in an attempt to discover new and better ways of preserving human donor organs for transplants. Due to their arid environment, wood frogs engage in explosive breeding after long rains when ephemeral pools are present, laying thousands of eggs over the course of just 3 days. In the paper, they discuss another possible benefit of this breeding strategy. Cannibalism is always a concern when large groups of animals are enclosed in a small space. They found that synchronized breeding resulted in tadpoles of similar sizes that were unable to cannibalize conspecifics. They conducted an experiment where they placed fresh hatchlings into tanks with tadpoles of various sizes. In this graph, dark circles represent no tadpoles, dark squares are small tadpoles, white circles are medium tadpoles, and white squares are large tadpoles. As you can see from the top graph, survivorship of the hatchlings was reduced, and even more so the larger their tank mates were. This cannibalism selects for wood frog breeding synchronization. If all the eggs hatch at the same time, then there is little chance that some will grow large enough to predate others. Late breeders will have lower fitness due to cannibalistic predation, as well as injuries sustained from interactions with more developed larvae of early breeders. So when early spring comes, the wood frogs arrive at ephemeral pools en masse, laying up to 1,000 eggs each and forming a large gelatinous mat of developing larvae, often covering the surface of these temporary breeding ponds.
The paper I looked at is known as Density-Dependent Mating Tactic Expression is Linked to Stress Hormone in Woodhouse's Toad, written by Christopher J. Leary, April M. Garcia, and Rosemary Knapp. The study focused on how the social environment can alter mating tactic expression through modulatory effects on the endocrine system. These studies showed that chorus density was positively correlated with the proportion of males adopting a non-calling satellite mating tactic in explosive breeding Woodhouse's toad, Bufo woodhousei. The study site was located on a privately owned horse pasture in central Oklahoma at the interface between the eastern deciduous forest and the central Great Plains grasslands. Vegetation at the site was composed primarily of grasses that were kept short via horse grazing and periodic mowing by the owner. The site was monitored nightly throughout the early spring and summer months in 2002, 3, and 4 to assess chorus activity. They recorded a series of 6 to 10 consecutive vocalizations from individuals and aggregates of calling males. To analyze the data, the calls were looked at using a Canary 1.1.1 bioacoustics software. The results showed that the chorus activity patterns varied considerably across the 3 years of study, spanning a total of 8, 16, and 3 nights from 2002, 2003, and 2004 respectively between the months of April and June. Next graph shows that across all the years combined, the chorus density was positively correlated with the proportion of males that adopted a satellite tactic. In figure 3, this shows that the chorus density was found to be significantly and positively correlated with circulating court level, but there was no correlation with androgen levels. In conclusion, we found that the vocal effort is positively correlated with circulating court levels in B. woodhousei, and therefore any density-dependent increase in vocal effort is expected to affect circulating court levels.
In this riveting conclusion, explosive breeding is a unique phenomenon that is expressed in neurons. This behavior is typically initiated by a change in normal environmental conditions that provide a short window for optimum breeding time. This, plus morphological and physiological factors, influence how successful frogs are at breeding offspring. Some of these factors include an increase in size of a body part, such as a nuptial pad, that could be beneficial during implexus or even laying eggs, and large masses that provide insulation for the eggs to survive. While these factors are being continuously discovered, there are still many questions of how these factors are influencing the success of explosive breeding. In the case of future research, it would be helpful to know if there are genetic factors that aid to this behavior. We looked at Anactrus woodhouse. Stop it. Circumstances, which just means an increase in the size of a body part, or the beneficial